Okay, let's just jump right into this explainer, shall we? We're going to tackle a grammar puzzle we actually deal with literally every single day. How to accurately report what other people say. We do it all the time in conversation, in emails and reports, but the actual mechanics behind shifting someone else's words into our own narrative can honestly be kind of tricky. So today, we're breaking down the absolute essentials of direct and indirect speech.
Picture this. You witness a totally dramatic moment. Someone screams, "Look out!" It's an intense, highly emotionally charged, imperative sentence. When you're writing a story or trying to convey a sudden burst of emotion like that, keeping the exact words intact is usually your absolute best bet.
But here's the catch. What if you had to tell a friend about this event a whole week later? Taking those exact words out of their original time and physical place, how would you do it without breaking the rules of grammar? Because, let's face it, you can't just repeat the phrase as if the danger is happening right now. You've got to adapt it.
So, let's lay down our fundamental building blocks. Direct speech. It is exactly what it sounds like, reporting the precise words spoken by a person, carefully enclosed in quotation marks. For instance, if your colleague Maha says, "I've got the files ready," you are basically acting as a perfect tape recorder, playing back her exact phrasing.
Now, think about the contrast here. You can quote Maha directly, exactly as she said it. Or you can use indirect speech, which is also known as reported speech, to simply convey her overall meaning without quoting her word for word. Notice how I becomes she, and have shifts to the past tense had. In indirect speech, we're no longer a tape recorder. We're essentially a translator of events.
Section 1. The mechanics of direct speech. We're going to look at treating punctuation like traffic signals.
Before we even get into translating from direct to indirect, we've got to know how to properly format a direct quote using punctuation. I want you to start treating marks like commas and question marks as traffic signals that guide the reader. Here are your 4 foundational rules. First, if you introduce the speaker before the quote, use a comma. Second, if you tell us who's speaking after the quote, the comma goes inside the closing quotation mark. Third, handle interruptions with double commas. And fourth, always, and I mean always, keep your question and exclamation marks inside the quotation marks.
A really brilliant example of this is the double comma rule for interruptions. Think about how those quotation marks have to be perfectly balanced. Wait a minute, comma, close quotes, then the attribution, she interjected, comma, and then we just open the quotes right back up for the rest of her sentence. It keeps the flow of the speaker's voice completely clear.
But hey, watch out for this super common error. If a quote ends with a question mark or an exclamation mark, you actually do not need an extra comma. Why? Because the punctuation itself already gives you that natural pause, that traffic signal. Sticking a comma right after a question mark is basically a grammatical crash.
Moving right along to Section 2, the time and space shift, navigating reported speech.
When you switch from direct quotes to indirect speech, you are quite literally time traveling. The crucial thing to remember is that if someone speaks to you on a Monday and you report it on a Friday, the word tomorrow is no longer accurate. Factually, tomorrow logically has to become the next day or the following day. The word yesterday becomes the day before. Even physical space changes. Here becomes there, because you probably aren't standing in the same room anymore.
Let's put that into practice. Imagine someone says, "I'll see you tomorrow." When we report that later, we are forced to shift the language to stay factually accurate. It becomes, "He said that he would see me the next day." If you just said, "He said he would see me tomorrow," your listener would literally show up on the wrong day.
And it's not just time and space, personal pronouns have to shift too. First-person pronouns like I and we naturally shift to third-person pronouns like he, she, or they. But there is a golden exception here. There is absolutely no change when you're reporting your very own words. If I said, "I like my car," I just report it as, "I said that I liked my car."
All right, Section 3, busting common misconceptions. Let's look at the rule versus reality traps.
Now for the fun part. Let's bust some of those rigid grammar myths that constantly trip up test takers and even seasoned professionals. Sometimes the rules we learn in school have major exceptions. First up, many people firmly believe you absolutely must use the word that to connect indirect speech, like he said that he was tired, but is that absolute rule actually true every single time? Absolutely not. In reality, you completely drop the word that when you're reporting questions or commands. If you say, he asked me that where I was going, it just sounds totally clunky, right? The correct way simply drops it, he asked me where I was going. Okay, here's another huge trap. In school, we're totally drilled to always backshift tenses to the past to show that the words were spoken previously. So, I am happy becomes, she said she was happy. But, does the tense always have to shift backwards?
Actually, no, it doesn't. If someone states a universal truth, you leave the present tense exactly as it is. The sun rises in the east. Stays. The teacher said that the sun rises in the east. And this applies if a situation is still currently true, like reporting someone's name. If she said, my name is Erin, you report it as, she said her name is Erin, because, well, her name hasn't magically changed since she spoke.
And get this, when you're reporting a future event or a promise that hasn't even happened yet at the time of your reporting, backshifting to the past tense isn't required at all. The action still lies in the future. So if a professor promises to help, will just remains will help, as long as that project is still upcoming.
All right, let's talk about modal verbs, because these are notoriously tricky. We know the standard rule is that will becomes would, and can naturally becomes could. So, following that exact logic, does shall automatically turn into should in indirect statements?
Surprisingly, no. It's a really fascinating nuance. If you change shall to should in a regular statement, it suddenly implies the strict obligation or duty. So we actually use would for statements. If Ryan says, I shall be there, it translates to, Ryan said he would be there. We reserve should strictly for reported questions, like if she asks, shall I open it? Which then becomes, she asked if she should open it.
Bringing us to our final grammar myth to bust today, does the word may always just smoothly convert over to might? Well, just like shall, context completely changes the game here.
Context is literally everything. If you're using may to talk about the possibility of something happening, like maybe being late, then yeah, it becomes might. But if you're using may to ask for or grant permission, it transforms into could. So, may I come in becomes, he asked if he could come in.
Let's see this in action. Imagine his secretary says, you may wait here. That permission beautifully shifts to could wait. But check out the end of the sentence. We also actively applied our space rule. Here changed to there. We are layering all the rules for perfect accuracy.
So, to wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with a little puzzle. It combines the whole shebang: time, space, pronouns, and permission. Consider this sentence. I may leave this book here tomorrow, she said. Think about everything we've covered today. How would you accurately report this exact sentence 3 days after it was spoken? Take a moment, work through those shifts in your head, and see if you can crack it. Until next time, keep analyzing the world around you and happy learning.